At Christmas dinner, every person at the table unwrapped a gift, except me. My daughter Mia laughed and said, "Oh, we forgot about you." It wasn't forgetfulness. It was their way of mocking me, trying to embarrass me in front of everyone. I just smiled and said, "That's all right. Take a look at what I did get." The whole room went quiet once they saw it. It wasn't a toy or a sweater. It was a document, and that single piece of paper changed everything. Their faces drained of color when they realized what it was. "Dad, we need 20,000 today." Mia's voice sliced through the air in the kitchen like a blade. I stood in the doorway, keys still in my hand, watching my daughter's face twist into something almost unrecognizable. The kitchen table was buried under a mess of bills, credit card statements, and overdue notices. Some were crumpled, others laid out flat like exhibits in a courtroom. Behind her stood Jackson, arms folded, wearing that smirk I'd grown to despise. "Tell him about the roof, Jules," he prodded. Mia wouldn't meet my eyes as she spoke. "The roof is sagging, Dad. The contractor said it could come down any day. We've got kids sleeping under that roof." I set my keys down on the counter slowly, steadying myself. "Show me the estimate," I said. The silence stretched tight, like a wire ready to snap. Mia glanced at Jackson. He shifted on his feet and cleared his throat. "We don't need estimates," Jackson said flatly. "We need action. This is the third time this month we've had to beg you for help that should come automatically from family." And he wasn't wrong about the number. 3 times. First, it was their car transmission that blew out on the highway, 5,000 gone. Then little Lily's dental emergency, 3,000 more. Now, this roof situation. "I'd like to see some paperwork," I said quietly. "Just so I can understand." "Understand what?" Mia's voice rose sharply. "That your own daughter is desperate? That your grandkids might get hurt?" Jackson leaned toward me, his breath sour, mixed with energy drinks. "You're sitting on retirement money while we're drowning. Don't you think it's time you shared some of that wealth with the people who actually matter?" A chill settled in my chest. 23 years I'd been writing checks. 23 years of so-called emergencies. And every time, they promised, "Just this once, we'll pay you back when things get better." Elaine's voice echoed in my mind, as if she were still standing beside me. "Carlo, sometimes love means saying no." I tried to offer another way. "Maybe we should sit down and go through your budget together. I can help." Mia slammed her palm against the table, scattering bills. "We don't need a lecture. We need our family to act like family." Jackson leaned in close to whisper something in her ear. I caught only 2 words, selfish and holding back. Mia's face hardened. Her voice turned sharp, almost surgical. "You know what, Dad? Maybe you should just leave. You're clearly not part of this family anymore." Her words landed like a punch to the chest. I gripped the door frame, running my fingers over the wood grain, trying to ground myself in something real while the world tilted sideways. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and Jackson's smug exhale. Mia turned her back, shuffling through papers, dismissing me like I was nothing more than a bank teller refusing her loan. I walked out to my car, my legs moving like they weren't even part of me. Through the kitchen window, I saw them talking animatedly already, probably planning their next strategy, or maybe just relieved they didn't have to deal with the stubborn old man anymore. I sat behind the wheel, staring through that warm yellow rectangle of their window light. Something shifted in me during those last few minutes, something final, something you can't take back. The engine started with its usual steady purr, but I didn't drive off right away. Instead, I sat in the dark, watching their silhouettes, memorizing this moment, the exact moment everything changed. When I finally stepped back into my own house, it felt cavernous, hollow. Elaine's reading lamp still glowed in the corner, a habit I'd never broken even after she was gone. The silence pressed in, heavy enough that I could hear my own heartbeat. I poured myself a bourbon into one of Elaine's crystal glasses, the same set Mia had always admired, and sank into my old leather chair. In the oak cabinet, the records waited, neatly filed. 17 years of financial documents, every receipt, every check, every bank statement. That's the way an engineer's mind works. You don't throw away data. The first folder was labeled Mia College. For years at Northwestern, $72,000 per year. I'd taken a second mortgage on this house, worked 16-hour shifts at the plant just to cover it. Mia had called me only twice her freshman year, once for textbook money, and once for money for a Cancun spring break trip. I remembered driving to her graduation. I stayed in a cheap motel 40 minutes away because the closer hotels cost too much. When Mia introduced me to her sorority sisters, she said, "This is my dad, the one who pays for everything," and laughed like it was some kind of cute joke. The wedding folder was thicker, $57,000 for a single day. The photographer alone cost more than my monthly pension. I walked her proudly down that flower-strewn aisle, even as she whispered complaints about the flowers being the wrong shade of pink. Jackson's bachelor party in Vegas, $5,000, because tradition mattered. Then came the down payment on their first house, $57,000, because it's an investment in our future. Dad, we need new furniture. We can't live like college kids anymore. Another $10,000 gone. I flipped through each file carefully, tallying the numbers in my head. The pattern was clear once I stopped lying to myself. Every request followed the same script: urgency, guilt, promises that never lasted, then silence until the next crisis rolled in. Monthly emergencies had become a routine. Car repairs right before vacations, medical bills insurance somehow didn't cover, urgent home repairs that always demanded immediate cash. The total stared me in the face. $340,000 over 17 years. Not loans. I finally admitted that. Gifts. Pure one-way gifts from a foolish old man to his entitled daughter and her lazy husband. I closed the final file and walked slowly to the kitchen window. The bourbon burned going down, but in a way that steadied me. It sharpened my thoughts. In the reflection on the window, I saw myself clearly for the first time in years. Not a victim, not a generous father, but a man who'd mistaken enabling for love, who had confused constant giving with weakness. Elaine's voice whispered again in my head. "Carlo, sometimes love means teaching consequences." I realized I'd been mourning the wrong loss that night. It wasn't my bond with Mia, that had been gone for years, kept on life support only by my refusal to admit it. What really died that evening was my willingness to pretend there was still something real between us. The bourbon glass weighed heavy in my hand, solid like a decision finally forming. For 17 years, I'd been the answer to every emergency, the fix for every problem. Maybe it was time to be something else entirely. I rinsed the glass, slid it carefully into the dishwasher, and noticed my hands were steady. My mind was clear. For the first time in years, I knew exactly what needed to happen next. Sleep never came. Instead, I sat at Elaine's old writing desk, surrounded by decades of financial records, and let the numbers tell me their brutal story. By dawn, I'd added up every penny. Not just the money I'd given away, but also what they'd wasted, the debts they'd hidden, the lifestyle they built off my guilt. At 6:30, the coffee maker came alive, same as it always had. But when I poured that first cup, my hands didn't tremble. The decision had taken shape sometime during those dark hours before sunrise, hard and solid as bedrock. For 17 years, I'd been coming at this the wrong way. I'd let emotions and sentiment cloud my judgment. But I wasn't built for that. I was built for solving problems methodically, like I'd done in engineering all my life. Define the problem, gather the data, create a solution, execute with precision. And the problem was plain. Mia and Jackson had learned to manipulate me without facing a single consequence. I'd trained them to treat me like an endless ATM instead of a father. My enabling had created the very monsters who now tormented me. So I opened my laptop and got to work. Property law, debt collection procedures, estate planning strategies. My engineer's brain devoured the information, sorting what mattered, discarding the rest. By 9:15 a.m., I had an appointment set with Arthur Bennett, my attorney. "I need to review my estate planning," I told his secretary. Some recent family matters made me reconsider my arrangements. It was true enough, but not the full story. That afternoon, I drove past Mia's place and really looked at it. The BMW in the driveway was this year's model. The landscaping looked like it came out of a magazine. Probably cost more than most folks' monthly paycheck. New windows, a fresh coat of paint, even a hot tub on the deck I didn't remember from before. All of it bought with my money while they cried poor. I parked 3 blocks away and called Frank Miller, an old buddy from the plant. We met over coffee at Meredith Diner, and I nudged the talk toward family and money troubles. "You're lucky with Mia," Frank said, stirring sugar into his third cup. "My daughter bleeds us dry with loans she never pays back. Her husband's the same way. Never keeps a job, but always has toys." "How's their marriage?" I asked casually. Frank gave a snort. Rocky as hell. Mostly money fights. Heard he's got a gambling problem. Credit cards maxed out. Payday loans. But they keep the act up. New car every year. Big vacations. Smoke and mirrors. Interesting. I filed that little piece away. That evening, I called Mia. I softened my voice, warm and fatherly. Honey, I've been thinking about our talk yesterday. I might have been too harsh. Oh, Dad, she said, relief pouring out of her voice. I was so worried. We really do need. I know, I cut in gently, but I want to do this the right way. Let me talk to my financial advisor, figure out how to safely move some investments. These things take time with larger amounts. At the mention of larger amounts, I could almost hear her sharpen, like a predator catching a scent. Well, she said quickly, if we're going to fix the roof, maybe we should take care of some of the other problems, too. The car, the credit cards, maybe 50, 60,000. Or more. The silence that followed was thick, electric. I could practically hear her pulse. Dad, that's incredible. We don't deserve. Of course you do. You're my family, I said smoothly. When I hung up, I leaned back and smiled. Not a warm smile. More like the smile of an engineer who sees the math finally balance. I had 1 week. 1 week to flip the script, to go from victim to architect of justice. Mia and Jackson thought they were about to land the biggest payday of their lives. They had no clue what was really coming. Arthur Bennett's office smelled of old leather and polished wood. He'd been my lawyer for 12 years, since Elaine's estate. Careful man, careful words, small-town discretion. Carlo, good to see you. You mentioned estate planning? I sank into the chair across from his heavy mahogany desk. Among other things, I need clarity on some sizable loans I've made to family. Arthur lifted an eyebrow. Loans. Documented transfers, I said. Over $300,000 to my daughter and her husband in the last 17 years. No contracts, but clear expectations of repayment that haven't been met. Arthur pulled out a yellow legal pad. Tell me everything. For the next hour, I laid it out with engineering precision. Dates, amounts, circumstances. He scribbled notes, asked sharp questions, and by the end, his frown was deep. Carlo, without formal loan paperwork, recovering that money will be difficult. I'm not chasing recovery, I told him. I'm chasing leverage. Arthur set his pen down. Explain. I want to know what rights I do have. What tools exist to demand repayment? And what happens if they can't pay? Arthur said slowly, leaning back. You're not looking for dollars. You're looking to apply pressure. I'm looking to teach consequences. 3 days later, I was in Michelle Davis's cramped office above the hardware store on 3rd Street. Arthur had recommended her. Private investigator. Discreet, thorough, effective. She looked over my written request and said, background check on your son-in-law. Finances, credit, legal history. That about right? This is family business, I answered carefully. Family protection. 2 days later, her report came through, locked behind an encrypted email. I printed it off and laid the pages across my kitchen table, studying them like a general planning his next move on a battlefield. Jackson Johnson was drowning. He owed $53,000 in gambling debts to all kinds of creditors, including some shady outfits that wouldn't ever show up on a standard credit report. His credit cards were maxed out, another $210,000 sunk there. On top of that, he'd taken out a personal loan from a payday lender at 37% interest. And the kicker? Their mortgage was already 3 months past due. The bank had started foreclosure proceedings. Mia and Jackson were living in a house of cards, barely holding it together with desperate tricks and reckless financial schemes. Every dollar I had ever handed them slipped right through their fingers into the pockets of creditors, while they piled on even more debt just to keep their little show going. I called Arthur again. Let's say, hypothetically, someone owed me a large amount of money and they were staring down foreclosure. What could I actually do? Well, Arthur said, if you were in first position on any of their debts, you could demand immediate repayment or even push for liquidation of their assets. Another angle would be to buy out their debts from existing creditors. It's complicated, but it's doable. How long would something like that take? I asked. Depends, he replied. If you turn up the pressure, it could happen in weeks. Play it slower, maybe months. I thanked him, ended the call, and opened my laptop. I started digging into how debt purchasing actually worked. My engineering background had drilled into me one important truth. Every system has weak points. Every structure has a breaking point. Mia and Jackson had built their entire lives on borrowed cash and empty promises. All I had to do was apply the right kind of stress in the right place, and the whole thing would collapse under its own weight. That night, I called Mia. Honey, I've got some good news about that money we talked about. Oh, Dad, thank God. When can we? Next week, I cut in. I'm setting up a family trust for the transfer. It'll be cleaner for taxes. Jackson will need to sign a few papers too. What kind of papers? She asked. Just a simple acknowledgement of the financial support I've already given you for the trust records. Standard procedure. After I hung up, I poured myself another bourbon and stared out the window. Somewhere out there, Mia and Jackson were probably celebrating, already planning how to burn through money they thought was headed their way. What they didn't know was that the papers they'd be signing would hand me legal control over everything they owned. They had no clue their generous benefactor was about to become their most dangerous creditor. The game was just about ready to begin. When I walked into Arthur's conference room the next day, the place didn't feel like a law office anymore. It felt like a war room. The big mahogany table was buried under incorporation documents, account numbers, and stacks of debt purchase agreements. Everything neat, everything legal, everything designed to crush. Midwest Recovery Services is now a fully licensed collection agency, Arthur said, sliding the final papers toward me. You're the sole owner, separate from your personal holdings. State approval came through yesterday. I picked up the Mont Blanc pen Elaine had given me on our 20th anniversary and signed. Each signature felt less like ink on paper and more like loading bullets into a gun. The gambling debts? I asked. Purchased for $110,000, Arthur said. You now own $53,000 of Jackson Johnson's obligations. His face stayed professional, but I caught a flicker of respect in his tone. The credit card companies were quick to sell. Collection agencies usually pick up charged-off debt for about 30 cents on the dollar. I did the math. $210,000 in credit card debt bought for just under $10,500. Add in the gambling debts, and I now controlled $85,000 worth of what they owed, for a little over $27,000 out of pocket. Timeline for collections? I asked. You can start right away. By law, it's usually a 10-day notice before escalating to court proceedings if they don't pay. Later that day, I parked near Mia's house. The BMW gleamed in the driveway. The lawn still looked perfect, like something straight out of a magazine. But I knew what kind of storm was brewing inside. My phone buzzed. A text from Michelle, my investigator. First collection notices delivered by certified mail this morning. Through their kitchen window, I spotted Mia holding an envelope, her face pale as chalk. Jackson was pacing behind her, arms flying, his whole body radiating panic. Even from across the street, I could feel the fear rolling off them. The irony was sharp. For 17 years, they'd staged fake emergencies to squeeze money out of me. Now, for the first time, they were staring down a real emergency, with no lifeline to grab. My phone rang. Mia's number lit up the screen. Dad, she said, her voice thin and shaky. Something's happening. We're getting these collection notices from companies we've never heard of. They're demanding immediate payment for debts we thought were settled. I softened my tone, injecting just the right mix of concern. What kind of notices, honey? Midwest Recovery Services. They're saying we owe them tens of thousands. But Dad, we've never borrowed money from a company with that name. That's odd, I said. Have you tried contacting them directly? Jackson did. They told him they bought our debts from other companies. Is that even legal? It's fairly common in collections, I said carefully. You might want to speak with a lawyer. We can't afford a lawyer, Dad. I don't know what to do. They're saying we have 10 days, or they'll take legal action. Her desperation should have cut me. But instead, it felt like justice, long overdue. I'm sorry you're dealing with this, Mia. I know it's stressful. Could you maybe help us figure this out? Maybe loan us enough to settle? There it was, the same pattern, the same cry for help, the same manipulation they'd used for 17 years. I'll need to think about it, I said slowly. This is a lot of money. Dad, please. We're desperate. I understand. Let me look over my finances and see what's possible. After hanging up, I sat there in my car, staring at their house. The curtains were drawn now, hiding whatever chaos was unfolding inside. The glossy facade was starting to crack. I started the engine and drove home. Francaro, The real collection process would begin. The phone woke me at 7:45 the next morning, ripping me out of the first decent sleep I'd had in weeks. Dad, you need to fix this right now. Mia's voice had changed overnight. Yesterday's scared confusion replaced by pure, white-hot rage, sharp enough to cut. Morning, Mia. Fix what? I answered, keeping my voice even. Don't play dumb with me. Jackson figured it out. Midwest Recovery Services. He saw that name on mail at your house last month. I poured coffee with steady hands, letting the steam calm me. I'm not sure what you're implying. You bought our debts. The accusation detonated through the line. What kind of sick person does that to their own family? The memory of her telling me I wasn't family anymore hung in my head like an answer I didn't want to give. The silence between us stretched tight as a coiled spring. In the background, I could hear Jackson shouting. The words were muffled, but the rage was clear. This is insane, Dad. You can't do this. Actually, I can, I said calmly. Everything I've done is legal. If you have questions about the collection process, you should talk to your attorney. We don't have money for an attorney. We don't have money for anything because you're trying to destroy us. Her voice trembled. I took a sip of coffee. I'm simply collecting debts that are legally owed, debts you accumulated through poor financial choices. Jackson's voice swelled. He grabbed the phone. This is harassment, old man. We'll file a complaint with the state, sue you for emotional distress. Have you been declared mentally incompetent? You're welcome to try, I said. But know this, threatening a creditor during collection proceedings can be criminal harassment. Also, I'm recording this call. Mia took the phone back, softer now. Dad, why are you doing this to us? Because you needed to learn that actions have consequences, I said. 15 years of rescuing, you did more harm than good. Letting you keep spinning out of control was the worst thing I could have done as a parent. That's not fair. I was angry. I didn't mean it. You told me I wasn't part of the family. I'm giving you the same consideration you gave me. I could hear the crack in her voice as she tried to hold herself together. Jackson snatched the phone again. What do you want? For us to grovel? To beg? Fine, we're sorry. We'll pay you back everything we owe. Excellent, I said. You have 23 days to settle the $85,000 balance in full. $85,000? Mia's voice went thin. But we never borrowed that much from you. No, I said. You borrowed that much from credit card companies and gambling houses. I bought those debts at market rates. Everything's documented and legal. We can't pay that, she said, the desperation back again. Then you'll need to liquidate assets, sell the BMW, downsize the house, make the same kinds of sacrifices I made for you over the years. The line blew up with overlapping voices, Mia sobbing, Jackson threatening, each talking over the other in frantic bursts. I cut through the noise quietly. I know about the gambling debts, Jackson. I know about the payday loans. I know about the 3 months of missed mortgage payments. I know everything. After a long, stunned silence, I repeated, 23 days. After that, I'll pursue legal remedies, including asset seizure and wage garnishment. Dad, please, she began, and I hung up. The phone began ringing right away. I let it ring out. 20 minutes later, it stopped. I checked voicemail. 7 messages, each worse than the last. Mia crying, Jackson threatening legal action, Mia begging, Jackson talking about calling the police. I deleted them all and called Arthur. They know, I said when he picked up. Time for phase 2. Be ready. Arthur said at 9:15 a.m. They hired Daniel Stone. He's already making noise about elder abuse and financial manipulation. I wasn't surprised. People cornered by desperation lash out. What's his play? I asked. Standard intimidation stuff, Arthur said. Claim you're mentally incompetent. Argue that buying the debts is financial abuse of a vulnerable adult. Threaten to petition for guardianship. He's got little evidence that would stand up in court, but he'll make things uncomfortable for a while. By noon, the attacks had multiplied and sharpened. My bank got a complaint alleging elder financial abuse. The police received an anonymous tip about my declining mental state. 3 neighbors called, confused by Jackson's story about me being scammed. Mia reached out to my sister Charlotte in Phoenix, sobbing that I'd lost my mind and needed help. She even contacted our old pastor and the senior center where I played chess, suggesting everyone watch for signs of dementia. Each move was calculated to isolate me, to make me look unstable and vulnerable. If I fought back too hard, they could paint me as paranoid. If I stayed quiet, repetition would lend their claims credibility. But I had anticipated this. 3 days earlier, Dr. Harrison had completed a full mental competency exam. The results were unambiguous. Cognitive function normal for my age. No signs of dementia or impairment. My financial advisor supplied detailed records of every transaction over 5 years, showing steady, rational decision-making and careful asset management. Arthur had assembled a defense file. Years of canceled checks proving Mia and Jackson's dependence, documented examples of their manipulation, plus character references from business associates and community members. The first crack in their campaign appeared when Charlotte called me directly. "Carlo, Mia says you're having some kind of breakdown. She wants me to fly out and handle your finances." "I'm fine, Charlie," I told her. "Mia and her husband owe me a lot of money, and I'm legally collecting it. They're trying to discredit me rather than face what they owe." "That doesn't sound like the Mia I know," she replied. "When's the last time you talked to her when she wasn't asking for something?" The pause said more than words. I couldn't remember. By evening, their strategy was collapsing under its own weight. The bank reviewed my account activity and found no suspicious transactions. The officer who followed up on Mia and Jackson's complaint wrote in his notes that I was clear, articulate, and fully competent. That one detail did more damage to their credibility than anything else. Neighbors also began whispering, asking questions about Mia and Jackson's sudden financial disaster. If I was supposedly being manipulated by scammers, why were collection agencies breathing down their necks instead of mine? Charlotte called again after speaking with a few relatives. "Carlo, nobody's buying their story. Everyone remembers how much money you've given them over the years." The real turning point came when Pastor Adams phoned me himself. "Carlo, I'm sorry to trouble you. Mia asked me to check on you, but to be honest, you sound the same as always. Are you having family difficulties?" "Just the usual," I said. "Some grown kids who still need to learn financial responsibility." He sighed. "I've counseled plenty of families through this. One of the hardest lessons of parenting is knowing when to stop rescuing your children." When I hung up, I started keeping meticulous notes for Arthur. Every false accusation, every lie they spread, every attempt to smear me went straight into the file. If this ended up in court, I'd have grounds to countersue. My phone buzzed, a text from Michelle, foreclosure notice posted on their door this afternoon. I walked to my front window and looked out at the quiet street. Across town, Mia and Jackson were staring at their world collapsing in real time. Their smear campaign had failed. Their lies had been stripped bare, and the house I'd once helped them by now had 30 days before the bank took it back. I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, what I felt was colder, sharper, not satisfaction, but the clean click of an equation solved. The balance sheet of my life finally evened out after years of mistakes. The phone rang. Mia's name lit up. This time I let it go to voicemail. Her message ran 11 minutes, a soundtrack of sobbing and desperation. I played it while organizing my files, letting her words wash over me like static. She tried to buy groceries, but every card was declined. 3 different stores, same result. Their credit lines had been shut down after I notified the banks I was calling their co-signed loans due immediately. "Dad, they want $610,000 by next Friday. The car loan, the credit line, the home equity loan. We never realized you were on all of them." Of course, they hadn't realized. They'd been too busy spending to ever read the paperwork. I deleted the message and made my next call. American Family Insurance. "This is Carlos Stewart. I need to remove my daughter Mia, her husband Jackson, and their family from my health insurance policy effective immediately." The rep hesitated. "Mr. Stewart, they've been covered under your plan for 8 years. Are you absolutely sure?" "Completely sure. Also, I'm changing the beneficiary on my life insurance policy. Mia and Jackson are no longer to receive any benefits." "Sir, this is a major change. Would you like to speak with a counselor about the implications?" "No counselor needed. Just process the changes." 2 hours later, I had dismantled every financial safety net I'd ever built for them. The college fund for their kids? Closed. The money sent to charity. The emergency credit card I'd given Mia for real emergencies? Canceled. The joint savings account we'd opened years ago? Transferred to my name alone. Each call was deliberate, surgical, permanent. By Wednesday, the siege was complete. Michelle's surveillance painted a grim picture. Jackson was working double shifts at the plant. Mia had pawned her wedding ring. Neighbors overheard them fighting in the driveway. Their polished image was disintegrating in plain sight. The BMW vanished overnight, repossessed. Mia was suddenly driving a rust-bucket Honda Jackson had borrowed from a coworker. The lawn service stopped showing up. The extravagant Christmas decorations they'd once bragged about were gone, sold off on Facebook Marketplace. By Thursday, the sheriff's deputies arrived, nailing the eviction notice right onto their front door in the middle of the day for the whole neighborhood to see. That evening, my phone rang over and over. I'd learned the rhythm. Mia first, weeping, pleading. Then Jackson, full of threats and half-baked bargains. Then Mia again, promising anything, everything, if I'd only help one last time. I let every call roll to voicemail. Friday night, I sat in my study reviewing Arthur's report. It laid everything out neatly. Every debt legally acquired, every collection notice properly delivered, every lifeline I'd once given them cut clean. Remarkably efficient, Arthur had written. Most collections take months to reach this level of pressure. The difference was simple. I knew every weak spot they had, because I'd been protecting those weak spots for 17 years. Another voicemail pinged, number 14 that day. I pressed play. Mia's voice was almost unrecognizable, hoarse and cracked from crying. Dad, please. I know we've been terrible. I know you're angry. But the kids. Lily keeps asking why she can't take art classes anymore. Frank doesn't understand why his friends can't come over. We're too ashamed of the house now. Please. I'll do anything. We'll sign anything. Just don't let us lose the house. Don't let the kids pay for our mistakes. I saved the message and made a note on my calendar. Frankero was Saturday. Frankero, I would put an offer on the table Mia and Jackson couldn't refuse. The endgame had finally arrived. I didn't call her back. Instead, I drove straight to Arthur's office. A manila folder waited on his desk, the last piece of the puzzle. Property transfer is finalized, Arthur said, sliding the papers toward me. The mortgage default combined with your debt holdings makes you the legal owner as of January 2nd. I studied the documents like they were engineering blueprints. Every line item clear, every condition met. 15 years of enabling had come to this, an ending Mia and Jackson never imagined. Absolute, total financial ruin. The timeline for taking possession was clear, 48 hours after the eviction notice was served. Arthur suggested we file it on December 27th, just enough time for them to stumble through the holidays before facing reality. Christmas had been weighing on me anyway. I'd been bracing myself for the usual storm of emotional manipulation, but now the holiday looked more like the stage for something I'd long been waiting for, justice. What about challenges? Appeals? I asked. Arthur removed his glasses, polishing them with a cloth as he answered calmly. Carlo, this case is airtight. They defaulted on debts that are legally yours. You hold first position on their main assets. No court in the country is going to overturn these proceedings. I left Arthur's office carrying the ownership papers in my briefcase, my chest strangely lighter than it had been in years. The very house I had once helped them purchase, the house they used as leverage to control and manipulate me, was now legally mine. That afternoon, I drove through their neighborhood for what I knew would be the last time as an outsider. Exercising my legal right to inspect the property, I walked through rooms scented with pricey candles and fresh paint. They had clearly spent money decking the place out for Christmas, extravagant decorations that must have been bought on credit they couldn't afford. In their bedroom, the mask slipped. I found a stack of thank you cards from relatives, all acknowledging loans Julie had begged for, supposedly to cover medical emergencies. More lies, more scams. While telling me they were broke, they'd been squeezing aunts and uncles with made-up sob stories. I took careful photos of everything. Evidence for Arthur's file. As I was locking the door, my phone buzzed. Mia's name lit up the screen. Dad, I've been thinking about Christmas, about family. Her voice was syrupy sweet now, softened with that fake contrition she had mastered when she was a kid angling for a special treat. I was hoping you might come for Christmas dinner. Just family. We could sit down, talk things through, maybe work something out. I almost laughed. Another trap. Another play for sympathy, using the holiday as a weapon. That sounds nice, Mia. Really? Oh, Dad, I'm so glad. Jackson and I have been talking, and we realize we made mistakes. We want to make things right. I'm sure you do. Christmas dinner is at 2:30. Nothing fancy, just family. I'll be there. When the call ended, I sat in my car outside their house for a while. Through the front window, I saw Mia pacing with excitement, probably dialing Jackson with the good news. The gullible old man had agreed. Their Christmas ambush was set. What they didn't know was that I'd be bringing the documents that would end it all. I drove home slowly, mapping out the final steps. Frankero was Christmas Eve. I had exactly 24 hours to tie off a 15-year mistake. For the first time in weeks, peace actually settled over me. Christmas Eve passed quietly. I spent the evening at my dining table, slipping the legal documents into a manila envelope, flattening each page so nothing would crease or tear. The property transfer, the debt consolidation, the eviction notice set for December 27th. Arthur had prepared every detail with precision. I laid out my charcoal gray suit, the one Elaine had chosen for our anniversary 5 years ago. Sharp, dignified, perfect for delivering life-altering news. Across town, Mia and Jackson were no doubt fine-tuning their ambush. Extended family was coming in from 3 different states, each relative expecting a heartwarming holiday reunion. I could practically see Mia rehearsing her lines, preparing everyone to pressure me into opening my wallet again. My phone buzzed throughout the night with messages from relatives, cousins saying they couldn't wait to see me, Charlotte confirming she'd landed safely. They were all just pawns in Mia's performance. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Christmas morning dawned bright and cold. I fixed coffee in Elaine's favorite mug, spread jam on toast, read the newspaper, just like any other day. The normalcy steadied me. By 1:40, I was dressed and ready. The envelope slid into my inner jacket pocket, pressed against my chest like armor. I pulled up to Mia's house exactly at 2:30. Cars lined the street. Charlotte's rental, Uncle David's pickup, even the Wilsons from Missouri. A full audience for the show Mia had planned. The front door opened before I could knock. Mia stood there in a red dress I didn't recognize, her smile blazing as bright as the oversized Christmas lights strung behind her. "Dad, you're here." She hugged me with dramatic warmth. "Everyone's been asking about you." The living room was buzzing with chatter. Decorations filled every corner. An enormous tree, garlands that looked professionally installed, a mountain of wrapped gifts under twinkling lights. Every bit of it bought on credit while they cried poor. "Carlo." Charlotte wrapped me in a hug. "You look wonderful." Mia turned to me with a smile. "We've been having some financial discussions." "Yes," I replied evenly. Jackson appeared at my side, gripping my hand a little too long. "Mr. Stewart, glad you could make it." His eyes searched my face, hunting for weakness. I gave him a polite smile. Dinner was extravagant, prime rib, fine wine, every detail calculated to showcase their supposed generosity and remind me of mine. Conversation stayed light, about work, kids, family updates, but beneath it all I felt the tension. Mia's eyes flicked to Jackson's every few minutes. Relatives shifted uneasily, as if they were waiting for some big reveal. "Shall we open gifts?" Mia finally chirped once dessert plates were cleared. We all gathered in the living room. She stationed herself near the tree like a conductor preparing her orchestra. One by one, the gifts rolled out. Designer purses, electronics worth thousands, luxury watches. Charlotte got a cashmere scarf. Uncle David received high-end golf accessories. Each present was paired with a dramatic backstory of Mia's search for the perfect gift. The pile beneath the tree shrank methodically. Mia made a big show of checking labels on the gifts, making sure everyone received their treasures just so. Then she paused, her expression shifting into one of carefully crafted confusion. "Oh." She turned her gaze directly to me, her voice projecting across the room. "I'm so sorry, Dad, but we didn't get you anything this year." The room went completely silent. Conversations halted mid-sentence. "Money's been so tight lately," she added, her tone a strange mix of false apology and thinly veiled accusation. "I hope you understand." I could feel every eye in the room locked on me, all waiting for some reaction, embarrassment, hurt, maybe even tears, that would validate their little holiday ploy. Instead, I smiled. "That's perfectly fine, Mia." I rose slowly, reaching into my jacket. "Because I have something for all of you." The envelope felt surprisingly light in my hands as I pulled it out. 20 pairs of eyes followed my every move. The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. I've received quite a gift myself this Christmas, I said, my voice calm and carrying through the hush. Mia's confident smile faltered. Jackson shifted in his chair, some instinct warning him that trouble was coming. I opened the envelope with deliberate care, revealing the documents Arthur had prepared. Official papers stamped with state seals and attorney signatures, the kind that permanently change lives. This house, I said casually, now belongs entirely to me. The words seemed to hang in the air, weighty and impossible to ignore. Charlotte blinked rapidly, trying to process what I had just said. Uncle David leaned forward, sure he had misunderstood. Mia's face went pale, so completely drained I feared she might faint. What? What do you mean? She stammered. I spread the property transfer documents on the coffee table, fanning them out like a winning hand in poker. Unpaid debts of $85,000. 4 months of mortgage defaults. Legal consolidation of every outstanding obligation. My voice remained steady, controlled. As of December 26th, you have 48 hours to vacate the premises. Jackson jumped to his feet. This is insane. You can't just. Everything I've done is completely legal, I said firmly, scanning the room full of stunned faces. Family members looked around at each other, trying to make sense of how Christmas dinner had turned into a courtroom. These documents represent 17 years of unpaid loans, gambling debts, and financial recklessness that I'm no longer willing to cover. Dad, please, Mia's voice cracked. You told me I wasn't part of this family anymore, I said quietly. I'm just honoring that decision. Charlotte spoke first, trying to mediate. Carlo, this is Christmas. Surely you can't mean. I mean every word, I replied, meeting her eyes steadily. Mia and Jackson have spent 17 years manipulating me financially while living beyond their means. This ends now. The room erupted into chaos. Uncle David demanded explanations. Cousins argued about the children. Mia sobbed, claiming I was ruining everything. But Jackson's reaction cut through the noise like a knife. You vindictive bastard. This is about your ego, not money. No, I said, standing to grab my coat. This is about consequences. Something you've never faced because I've been shielding you from them. Mia clutched my arm as I headed for the door. What about Lily and Frank me? What about your grandchildren? I looked down at her desperate face. I hope someday they'll understand that enabling destructive behavior isn't love. It's cowardice. Jackson stepped forward, fist clenched. We'll fight this. We'll sue you for everything you've got. With what money? I asked calmly. You're bankrupt, Jackson. You've been bankrupt for years. I've just stopped pretending otherwise. I reached the foyer as accusations flew behind me. Family members took sides, demanded I reconsider, threatened to cut me out forever. Mia's perfectly planned Christmas descended into total chaos. I paused at the front door, her voice rising above the others. I hate you. I wish you were dead. I looked back at the woman I had raised, supported, and enabled for 34 years. I know, I said quietly. That's why this had to happen. I closed the door behind me and stepped into the cold December air. From inside, I could hear muffled shouting, crying, the sound of expensive Christmas gifts being swept aside for emergency family conferences. I started the engine and drove home through empty streets, twinkling holiday lights passing by, leaving behind the wreckage of their last attempted manipulation. The house was cathedral quiet when I returned. I hung my coat carefully in the closet, laid the legal documents on my desk, and made tea with the same meticulous precision I'd once used for engineering calculations. At 4:42, my phone started buzzing. Mia first, sobbing, begging for forgiveness. Then Jackson, screaming threats and legal challenges. Charlotte calling, demanding explanations. Uncle David trying desperately to mediate. I let every call go straight to voicemail. By evening, the buzzing had stopped entirely. I guessed Mia and Jackson were too busy fighting each other to coordinate any further attacks. 15 years of buried resentments were finally spilling out. Mia blaming Jackson for his gambling debts. Jackson exposing Mia's manipulation tactics. Both of them realizing that their perfect little facade had finally crumbled. The next morning brought confirmation from Arthur. They've retained Daniel Stone again, he said. He's making noise about emotional duress and Christmas ambush tactics, but he has no legal standing. The property transfer is solid. Timeline's moving exactly as planned. Eviction notice served at 9:15 a.m. They have until December 28th to vacate. I spent the day going through Elaine's belongings, finally ready to face memories I'd been avoiding. In her jewelry box, I found the pearl earrings she'd worn on our wedding day. Mia had always admired them, assuming they'd be hers someday. Now they were headed to charity, along with everything else she had ever considered her inheritance. Charlotte called on December 27th, her voice carefully measured. "Carlo, I've been thinking about Christmas dinner, about what you said. And Mia told me about all the money you've given them over the years." The amounts, she paused. I had no idea it was so much. Most people wouldn't. She added that Mia had told me I wasn't family anymore and had tried to claim she didn't mean it. I said quietly, I told Charlotte, "People don't say things that cruel unless they mean them. So this is permanent. You're really evicting them. This is justice, Charlie, something I should have done years ago." The eviction unfolded exactly as Arthur had predicted. Mia and Jackson left quietly, loading the last of their belongings into a borrowed truck while neighbors peeked from behind curtains. No dramatic scenes, no last-minute pleas. Just the inevitable result of 17 years of reckless financial behavior. New Year's Eve arrived with an unusual calm. I sat in my living room, snow falling gently past the window, thinking about the year ahead. No more crisis calls. No more sudden financial emergencies. No more tiptoeing around people who saw me only as a source of money. The loneliness was real, but it felt pure, like taking a long, deep breath after years of holding it in. At midnight, I raised a glass of Elaine's favorite champagne to her memory. "You were right," I whispered to her photograph. "Sometimes love means saying no." The house was mine again. My money was mine. My time belonged to me. For the first time in 17 years, I was free to discover who Carlo Stewart could be when he wasn't being manipulated, used, or taken for granted. The phone sat silently on the table beside me. No desperate calls. No manufactured emergencies. No one treating me like a personal ATM. Justice, I realized, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just whispers peace. I finished the champagne and went to bed, knowing I'd wake up in a house that belonged to me, with money and accounts I alone controlled, free to build relationships based on mutual respect instead of financial dependence. The revenge was complete, but more importantly, the enabling was over. And that thought, as sleep came easily for the first time in years, was the real victory.